Felix vanishes after leaving one heartbreaking message. What Stray Kids discovers 24 hours later changes everything they thought they knew. Episode 1. Don't look for me, please. The message appeared on Bang Chan's phone just as thunder cracked across the night sky, loud enough to shake the windows of the dorm. His hands froze above the kitchen counter while the kettle whistled in the background, forgotten. For one impossible second, the world stopped moving. Felix. There was no reply. Chan called immediately. The line rang once, twice, then silence. The call ended. A cold sensation crawled across his spine. Something was wrong. Not the kind of wrong that could be explained by a drained phone battery or someone taking a late-night walk. This felt heavier, darker, like the air itself had suddenly become impossible to breathe. He rushed down the hallway. Felix. His voice echoed through the dorm. No answer. One by one, the bedroom doors opened. Changbin stepped out first, rubbing his sleepy eyes before immediately noticing Chan's expression. What happened? Chan didn't answer. Hyunjin appeared next, his face pale before anyone had spoken a word. Lee No silently walked into the hallway, sensing the tension before understanding it. Han looked between everyone nervously. Seungmin frowned. Jeonggin's heartbeat quickened without knowing why. Chan slowly lifted his phone. He sent this. The 7 words glowed across the screen. Don't look for me, please. Nobody spoke. It was impossible. Felix would never disappear without telling them. Never. Han forced out an awkward laugh that convinced no one. He's joking, right? No one answered. Chan walked quickly toward Felix's room. The door stood slightly open. His bed was perfectly made. His favorite hoodie was gone. His backpack had disappeared. But something immediately felt strange. The room looked too clean, too organized. Felix normally left books scattered across the desk, headphones hanging from the chair, tiny sticky notes filled with random reminders. Tonight, everything had been carefully arranged, like someone preparing a room that would never be used again. Hyunjin slowly approached the desk. There, beside a framed photo of all 8 members smiling during their last vacation, rested a tiny yellow bracelet. Felix never took it off. Chan picked it up carefully. His fingers trembled. This. His voice cracked. He promised he'd wear this forever. Silence swallowed the room. Rain hammered harder against the windows. Lee No quietly opened the wardrobe. Most clothes remained. Only several essentials were missing. Enough for someone planning to leave, but not enough for someone starting a new life. Seungmin noticed something else. The passport, still inside the drawer. Wallet, still there. Bank cards, untouched. What kind of person leaves voluntarily without these? He whispered. Nobody had an answer. Chan immediately called Felix's manager. Nothing. Staff members hadn't seen him. His schedule for tomorrow remained untouched. Security cameras around the building were checked. At 8:47 p.m., Felix exited alone wearing a black hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He carried only a small backpack. No one stopped him. He looked calm, almost too calm. The footage ended as he disappeared into the darkness beyond the entrance. No taxi, no waiting vehicle. He simply walked away, as if he already knew exactly where he was going. Hours passed. Every hospital nearby was contacted. Nothing. Police stations. Nothing. Friends, nothing. Family, nothing. It was as though Felix had dissolved into the night itself. By dawn, exhaustion covered every face inside the dorm. Nobody had slept. Han sat on the living room floor, staring blankly at Felix's empty mug. The coffee inside had gone cold hours ago. Hyunjin held the yellow bracelet tightly inside his hand. His fingers hurt from squeezing it. He refused to let go. Chan replayed the final message over and over again. Don't look for me. Those words felt wrong. Not because Felix wrote them. Because they sounded like someone trying to protect the people he loved. Lee No quietly entered Felix's room once more. Something bothered him. He couldn't explain it. The silence felt artificial. He slowly walked around. Desk, bookshelf, closet, window, nothing. Then, his eyes stopped. The family photo. It leaned slightly to one side. Felix always straightened everything. Always. Lee No carefully lifted the frame. Behind it rested a folded piece of paper. His heartbeat accelerated. Jan. Everyone rushed into the room. Lee No unfolded the paper carefully. It wasn't a letter. Only a small, hand-drawn map. No names. No explanations. Just a winding road leading toward an old lighthouse near the coast. At the bottom, written in Felix's unmistakable handwriting, were only 6 words. If I'm too late, forgive me all. The room fell completely silent. Hyunjin covered his mouth. Han's eyes instantly filled with tears. Jeongin stared at the paper without blinking. Chan could barely breathe. Too late. Too late for what? Nobody knew. But one thing had become terrifyingly clear. Felix hadn't disappeared because he wanted to leave them. He had disappeared because he believed he had no other choice. Outside, the storm finally began to fade. Yet inside the dorm, a far greater storm had only just begun. The first rays of sunlight struggled to break through the thick grey clouds as Bang Chan folded the hand-drawn map and slipped it carefully into his jacket pocket. No one spoke. The silence hanging over the dorm felt heavier than the storm that had passed only hours before. Every member understood the same terrifying truth without saying it aloud. Whatever had driven Felix away had begun long before his disappearance. Hyunjin was the first to move. We're going. His voice was quiet, but there was no hesitation. Chan nodded once. Within minutes, the 8-seat van was speeding toward the eastern coastline, rainwater spraying behind the tires as empty highways stretched endlessly ahead. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the glass, but inside the vehicle, only the engine could be heard. Han kept staring at Felix's final text message on his phone. Don't look for me, please. He read it again. And again. The wording refused to make sense. Felix always ended important messages with a smile, even during difficult times. Sometimes it was just a tiny emoji, sometimes a joke that only the members understood. This message carried none of that warmth. It was painfully short, stripped of everything that made Felix, Felix. It doesn't sound like him, Han whispered. No, Sumin replied. It sounds like someone forcing himself to sound cold. Chan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. That possibility had been haunting him since midnight. If Felix had wanted to disappear forever, why leave a map? If he wanted to be found, why tell them not to search? The contradictions circled endlessly inside his mind. Nearly 2 hours later, the road narrowed into a forgotten coastal route surrounded by dense pine trees. The sea emerged beyond the cliffs, restless and grey beneath the overcast sky. At the end of the cracked road stood the old lighthouse. It had long been abandoned. Rust stained its white walls. Broken windows reflected the dull morning light. Wild grass covered the entrance, untouched for years. "This place," Jeongan murmured. "It feels abandoned." Chan looked down at the map. Every curve matched perfectly. "This is it." The members spread out, searching carefully. The salty wind carried the cries of distant seagulls, while waves crashed violently against the rocks below. Hyunjin walked around the back of the lighthouse before suddenly stopping. "There are footprints." Everyone hurried over. Fresh footprints. Only one set. They led toward a narrow path descending the cliff. Chan knelt beside them. "They're recent." Hope flickered across every face. Felix had been here. They followed the trail cautiously until it ended near a small wooden bench overlooking the sea. The bench was weathered by years of rain. No one sat there now, but something rested on the seat. A small paper bag. Hyunjin picked it up carefully. Inside lay 8 identical keychains. Each one carried a tiny carved star. The members immediately recognized them. Months earlier, Felix had excitedly shown everyone an online shop selling handmade friendship charms. He had laughed and said they should all buy matching ones someday. None of them ever had. Now 8 of them sat quietly inside the bag. One for every member. Han's hands trembled. He already bought them. Beneath the keychains was another folded note. Chan unfolded it slowly. His breathing became shallow. The handwriting was unmistakably Felix's. "If you're reading this, I'm sorry for making you worry. I wanted to protect all of you. Please don't blame yourselves. Some promises can only be kept by disappearing." No signature. No explanation. Only those haunting words. Hyunjin's vision blurred with tears. "What promise?" "No idea," Lino answered softly. But he believed it. Chan looked toward the endless ocean. For the first time since the nightmare had begun, anger mixed with fear. Someone had convinced Felix that leaving was the only way to protect the people he loved. That thought was unbearable. Seungmin suddenly noticed something caught between 2 rocks below the cliff. "Wait!" He climbed down carefully and reached into the narrow gap. When he returned, his face had gone pale. In his hand was a silver necklace. The tiny angel wing pendant shimmered faintly despite the cloudy sky. Everyone recognized it instantly. Felix had worn it almost every day for years. He once admitted it reminded him that even during the darkest moments, someone was always watching over him. He never took it off. Never. Chan closed his eyes. If Felix had willingly left behind both the bracelet and the necklace, then every goodbye had been planned. Not impulsive. Not emotional. Deliberate. Painfully deliberate. A gust of wind swept across the cliff, carrying the scent of salt and rain. Far below, waves crashed endlessly against the rocks, swallowing every echo. Hyunjin quietly sat on the old bench, clutching one of the tiny star keychains. He knew we'd come here. No one argued. Because it was true. Felix had left a trail, not to reveal where he was, but to leave behind pieces of his heart for the people he loved most. And each piece raised a question none of them could answer. What had frightened him so deeply that saying goodbye in person became impossible? Chan stood motionless, the folded note trembling between his fingers as the ocean wind threatened to tear it away. The abandoned lighthouse, the neatly arranged gifts, the familiar necklace, none of it felt like the actions of someone who had simply run away. It felt like the quiet preparation of someone carrying a burden too heavy to share. No one spoke as they returned to the van. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. Hyunjin rested his forehead against the cold window, watching the coastline disappear behind them. Han kept turning the tiny star keychain over in his palm, tracing its carved edges with his thumb. Jeongin stared at the empty seat Felix usually occupied, unable to look anywhere else. Halfway back to Seoul, Chan's phone vibrated. Every member looked up instantly. An unknown number. He answered without hesitation. Felix. Only static answered. A faint crackling sound drifted through the speaker. Then, for a split second, breathing. Very soft. Almost impossible to hear. Felix, Chan shouted. The breathing stopped. A dull metallic noise echoed in the background, followed by what sounded like a train horn in the distance. Then the call disconnected. The van fell silent. Seungmin immediately replayed the sound in his mind. A train. Lee No nodded slowly. And metal, maybe a station or somewhere near the tracks. It wasn't much. But after 24 hours of searching, even the smallest clue felt priceless. Chan drove directly to the company's headquarters. Their manager was already waiting, having spent the entire night contacting anyone who might have seen Felix. I found something, the manager said quietly. He placed a small envelope on the conference table. It arrived this morning. Chan opened it carefully. Inside was a receipt from a neighborhood convenience store. Time 9:18 p.m. The same night Felix disappeared. The purchase list was strangely ordinary. A bottle of water, a disposable phone charger, a notebook, a black marker, nothing else. At the bottom of the receipt, written in blue ink, was a single sentence. I'm sorry I couldn't smile until the end. Han covered his face with both hands. No. His voice broke completely. Felix would never write something like that unless. He couldn't finish the sentence. The room remained silent. Chan turned the receipt over. There was a small logo printed at the top. The convenience store was located only a few hundred meters from an old railway station on the outskirts of the city. The same direction suggested by the mysterious phone call. Within an hour, the members arrived at the nearly deserted station. It looked forgotten by time. Rust stained the tracks. Old speakers crackled with distorted announcements. Only a handful of passengers waited quietly beneath the faded roof. Chan showed Felix's photo to the elderly station attendant. The man adjusted his glasses before studying it carefully. Oh yes. Every member froze. I remember him. Hope surged through the group. He came here yesterday evening. When? Chan asked urgently. Just before 9:30. Was he alone? The attendant hesitated. I thought so at first. A heavy silence settled over the platform. But, he pointed toward the far end of the station. When he left, someone was walking several meters behind him. Chan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Did you see their face? The old man slowly shook his head. They wore a dark hood. Did they speak? No. Did Felix notice? I don't know. The answer sent a chill through everyone. For the first time since Felix vanished, the possibility they had been trying to ignore became impossible to dismiss. Maybe Felix hadn't truly been alone. Maybe someone had been following him all along. As the members stood in stunned silence, Hyunjin noticed something taped beneath one of the old wooden benches near platform 3. He crouched down and carefully peeled it away. It was a folded page torn from a notebook. The paper smelled faintly of rain and ink. Across the center, written in Felix's familiar handwriting, were just a few careful words. If you find this, please believe me. I wasn't running away from you. I was running away for you. Hyunjin's vision blurred. He pressed the note against his chest as tears silently rolled down his face. No one tried to stop him. Because, for the first time, they all understood the same heartbreaking truth. Whatever danger Felix believed he was facing, he had chosen to carry it alone, not because he trusted his friends less, but because he loved them too much to let them share the weight. Night settled over the city like a heavy curtain as the members returned to the dorm with more questions than answers. The notes, the lighthouse, the railway station, each clue felt painfully personal, as though Felix had carefully arranged a trail that revealed his heart without revealing where he had gone. Chan spread everything across the dining table. The yellow bracelet, the angel wing necklace, the 8-star keychains, the handwritten map, the convenience store receipt, the 3 short notes. Each item carried Felix's unmistakable handwriting, yet together they formed a puzzle that refused to fit. There has to be something we're missing, Chan murmured. Lee No silently examined the map again. His eyes moved slowly over every line before stopping near one corner. There. Everyone leaned closer. A tiny pencil mark had almost been erased. Not a word, not a symbol, just 3 small circles connected by a thin line. Hyunjin frowned. That wasn't on the first copy. It was, Lee No replied quietly, we just didn't notice. Seungmin immediately opened his laptop. He enlarged a photo of the map until the faded circles became visible. 3 locations: the abandoned lighthouse, the railway station, and one final place, an old community library on the northern edge of Seoul. Why there? Han asked. No idea, Chan answered. But Felix wanted us to notice it. The next morning, they arrived at the library just after it opened. The building looked untouched by time. Tall wooden shelves stretched endlessly beneath warm yellow lights. The smell of old paper filled the air. Only a few visitors sat quietly reading near the windows. An elderly librarian greeted them with a gentle smile. Can I help you? Chan showed Felix's photograph. The woman's expression changed immediately. Yes. Hope returned to every face. He came here yesterday morning. He did, Jeongin asked. She nodded. He stayed for nearly 2 hours. What was he doing? He wasn't reading. She walked toward the back of the library, stopping beside a small locker reserved for visitors. He asked if he could leave something here. She unlocked the compartment. Inside rested a worn hardcover notebook tied with a blue ribbon. My instructions were simple, she said softly. I was told to give this only if 8 young men came together asking about him. The room fell silent. Chan accepted the notebook with trembling hands. Felix had known they would come. Slowly, he untied the ribbon. The first page contained only 1 sentence. If you're holding this, it means you refuse to give up on me. Hyunjin lowered his head. A tear landed quietly on the paper. The following pages were filled with handwritten memories. Not explanations. Not confessions. Memories. The first meal they had cooked together. Their first concert. Late-night practice sessions. Arguments that ended in laughter. Birthdays. Small jokes nobody outside the group would understand. Every page described moments that had shaped their family. Beside each memory, Felix had written what he had never managed to say aloud. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I laughed because you were beside me. I never felt alone while I had all of you. I wish I had told you that more often. Han quietly wiped away tears. He wrote all of this. It must have taken weeks, Suman whispered. Near the end of the notebook, the handwriting changed. The letters became shakier. The sentences shorter. I've been pretending to smile. I'm sorry. I thought I could carry it alone. I was wrong. Chan closed his eyes. For months, they had accepted Felix's bright smile without realizing how much pain it might have been hiding. The final page held a small envelope. Inside was a single photograph. All 8 members stood backstage after one of their earliest concerts, exhausted but laughing uncontrollably. Across the back, Felix had written, "No matter where life takes us, this will always be my home." No address, no farewell, just those words. The librarian quietly approached again. "He asked me to tell you something." Chan looked up immediately. "What did he say?" She smiled sadly. "He said," her voice softened, "if they ever find this notebook, tell them I never stopped loving them, not even for a second." The room became unbearably quiet. Outside, sunlight streamed gently through the library windows, illuminating tiny particles of dust drifting through the air. For the first time since Felix disappeared, the members no longer felt abandoned. Instead, they felt the depth of a love so overwhelming that Felix had believed disappearing was the only way to protect it. And that realization hurt far more than his absence ever could. The notebook remained on the table long after they returned to the dorm. No one had the strength to close it. Its pages had answered one question while creating another. Felix had never wanted to leave them. He had wanted to protect them. But from what? Chan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. For 2 days, none of them had slept properly. Every phone call, every knock on the door, every passing car outside the dorm made their hearts race with the same desperate hope. Hyunjin carefully picked up the photograph from the envelope. "We missed it." Everyone looked at him. "What do you mean?" He turned the photo over once more. The message on the back was familiar. "No matter where life takes us, this will always be my home." Hyunjin narrowed his eyes. "Not the writing. The picture." Chan stepped closer. The photograph had been taken years earlier, backstage after one of their first concerts. Everyone was smiling. Everyone except Felix. Not because he looked sad. Because he was looking somewhere else. Past the camera. Toward someone standing outside the frame. Lino slowly took the picture. "Can we enlarge it?" Within minutes, Suman scanned the old photograph onto his laptop. The image appeared on the screen. He zoomed in. The quality blurred. He adjusted the sharpness. A faint reflection became visible in a metal equipment case behind the members. There was someone else backstage. Only part of a shoulder. A dark sleeve. A silver watch. Nothing more. "Could it be staff?" Jeongin asked. "No," Chan answered quietly. Everyone backstage that day wore event badges. The reflected figure wore none. Han frowned. "Then who was watching us?" Silence answered him. Their manager arrived an hour later, carrying several old storage boxes from the company archives. "You asked for everything related to that concert." Chan thanked him before opening the first box. Old schedules, stage layouts, security passes, printed photographs. Nothing unusual. Until Lee No unfolded a seating chart. There was an incident. Everyone looked up. A small report had been clipped to the paperwork. One sentence caught Chan's attention immediately. An unidentified individual attempted to enter the backstage area but disappeared before security could question them. The report had been filed and forgotten. No name, no description, just a brief note. Hyunjin stared at the paper. The same day this photo was taken. Chan slowly nodded. A strange feeling settled over the room. They couldn't explain it. It wasn't proof. It wasn't even a real lead. Yet every clue seemed to circle back to the same invisible shadow. Someone had been present. Someone Felix had noticed. Someone nobody else remembered. That evening, while organizing the notebook again, Jeongin accidentally dropped it onto the floor. A folded sheet slipped from inside the back cover. Everyone froze. "It wasn't there before," Han whispered. Chan unfolded it carefully. Unlike the earlier notes, this page was longer. The handwriting was steadier, almost peaceful. "If you're reading this, then you found more than I expected. Please don't spend your lives blaming yourselves. Everything I chose because I wanted to protect the people who became my family. There were days I wanted to tell you everything. I almost did. But every time I looked at your faces, I couldn't bear the thought of dragging you into my fears. If I disappear, remember me for my laughter, not for my silence. Promise me you'll keep smiling together." That's the only goodbye I could never say aloud. No one spoke. Hyunjin quietly wiped his eyes. Han pressed both hands against his face, unable to stop crying. Even Lino, who rarely showed his emotions openly, lowered his head as tears gathered in his eyes. Chan folded the letter with extraordinary care. "It doesn't feel like a farewell." Seungmin nodded slowly. "It feels like someone hoping we'll forgive him." Outside, the evening sky slowly cleared for the first time since Felix vanished. Golden light filtered through the dorm windows, warming the quiet room where 7 friends sat surrounded by the pieces of someone they loved. His voice was absent. His laughter no longer echoed through the hallway. His favorite mug still rested beside the sink. His slippers remained neatly beside his bed. Every corner of the dorm carried traces of him, not as memories fading with time, but as reminders that love could remain present even when the person was gone. And although they still had no answers, each note, each photograph, and each keepsake revealed the same truth again and again. Felix's greatest fear had never been disappearing. It had been leaving behind pain for the people he loved most. Morning arrived quietly. For the first time in days, no one rushed to check their phones. No one searched through old security footage. No one called another hospital or another police station. The endless chase had finally come to an end, not because every question had been answered, but because every clue Felix had left behind had already spoken the truth he wanted them to understand. The 7 members gathered in the living room. The notebook rested in the center of the table beside the yellow bracelet, the silver angel wing necklace, and the 8 tiny star keychains. Chan looked at each of them before breaking the silence. "I kept thinking our job was to bring him back." His voice was calm, though his eyes remained red from countless sleepless nights. "But maybe what Felix wanted most was for us to remember how much we meant to him." No one argued, because deep inside, they had all reached the same conclusion. Felix had never disappeared because he stopped loving them. He had disappeared after spending every last ounce of strength trying to protect the people he called his family. Hyunjin gently picked up one of the star keychains. "I used to think goodbye meant someone stopped being part of your life. A faint, bittersweet smile appeared on his face. Now I think goodbye can also mean carrying someone with you every single day. Han nodded, unable to speak. The room fell into a peaceful silence. Outside, the rain that had haunted the city for days had finally disappeared. Warm sunlight poured through the windows, filling every corner of the dorm with a quiet golden glow. Chan walked toward Felix's bedroom and slowly opened the door. Everything remained exactly as it had been. The neatly made bed, the books stacked carefully on the shelf, the small plant by the window reaching toward the morning light. He placed the yellow bracelet beside the photograph of all 8 members smiling together. Then he whispered softly, "Your place will always be here." The others entered one by one. Lino carefully placed the angel wing necklace beside the bracelet. Changbin set the notebook on the desk. Hyunjin hung the star keychain on the lamp next to Felix's bed. Han placed the old backstage photograph in its frame. Seungmin adjusted it until it stood perfectly straight. Jeongin quietly opened the curtains, letting the sunlight fill the room. No one cried. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because they finally understood that grief and love could exist together. Before leaving the room, Chan noticed something taped beneath the edge of the windowsill. It was almost invisible. A tiny folded piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. Only one sentence was written inside. "Thank you for giving me a place that always felt like home." Chan smiled through the tears gathering in his eyes. "You never had to thank us." He folded the note again and placed it inside the notebook where it belonged. Days slowly turned into weeks. Life did not suddenly become easy. The empty chair at dinner still hurt. The quiet hallway still felt unfamiliar. Sometimes one of them would instinctively call Felix's name before remembering the silence that followed. But little by little, the memories stopped feeling like knives. They became warmth. Whenever they laughed together, someone would say, "Felix would have loved this." Whenever they stood on stage beneath thousands of lights, they imagined his bright smile somewhere among them. Not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as the part of their hearts that would never fade. One evening, long after the storm had become nothing more than a distant memory, the 7 members returned to the seaside lighthouse. The ocean stretched endlessly beneath a sky painted with shades of orange and pink. The wind carried the familiar scent of salt. Chan removed the final unopened star keychain from his pocket. It had Felix's name engraved on the back. He smiled gently before placing it on the old wooden bench overlooking the sea. No speeches were needed. No dramatic farewell. Only silence. The kind of silence shared by people who understood that some bonds were stronger than distance, stronger than absence, and even stronger than time itself. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, its golden light reflected across the waves like countless tiny stars dancing on the water. For a brief moment, the breeze felt strangely warm. Hyunjin closed his eyes and smiled. "It feels like he's still with us." No one answered. No one needed to. Together, they turned away from the lighthouse and began walking home. Not because they had forgotten Felix, but because they knew they never would. Some people leave footprints that disappear with the rain. Others leave behind memories that fade with the passing years. But there are a rare few whose kindness, laughter, and unconditional love become part of the people they leave behind. Felix was one of those people. And as long as 7 hearts continued to beat with the love he had given them, he would never truly be gone. The end.